Welcome back, everyone, to Vox Markets. My name is Paul, and I'm delighted today to be able to speak to Vic Kist, the CEO of Saietta, a pioneering tech firm looking to disrupt the global EV market with its super efficient, high performance and low cost axial flux electric motors. So welcome, Vic.
Well, thank you, and thank you for inviting me. We're delighted to be here, and we're very proud of what we've achieved.
Yeah, well, hey, you did pretty well a few weeks back. You raised 37.5 million pounds at 120p. So absolutely terrific performance. But before we sort of dig into the details of where you're going to spend all the money, could you just give us a quick sort of walk us through the key USPs of the technology?
Yeah, pleasure. So we went on this mission about 4 years ago in total stealth mode because we looked at the market and we were like, okay, axial flux motors bring you further with the same battery. Now that makes sense. And we did an invention where we effectively redesigned the copper part in an electric motor. We have effectively reinvented the electric motor, but suitable for mass volume production. And that was the missing link with all other axial flux motors around the world, in our opinion. And we did that so well that we were like, whoa, okay, close the curtains. We've been testing around the clock for 3 years, used the fantastic UK EIS investment scheme, and then as a result of opening the curtains and landing some substantial orders in 2020, COVID year, we were almost invited to IPO, and we did it. We've just completed it. So
yeah, well, brilliant. I mean, I've actually got a bit of history here because I'm an electrical engineer, and I remember when I did my O-level physics, and I sort of was making these the radial, traditional sort of electric motors, and these things were sort of the problem with it. I mean, they were reasonably efficient, sort of 80% or 75% efficient. I mean, far more efficient than an internal combustion engine, which was 40% of energy. So and they don't produce obviously any carbon emissions, so that's obviously good. But they heated up and they were slow, and the performance was poor because they used to stick as well. And how does a sort of an axial sort of flux technology, how does that improve it? Is it sort of improving the density and the street of the actual, and the power and the torque and stuff of the actual motor?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's the magic sauce effectively compared to, I mean, every car has an alternator, a starter motor.
Yeah.
They're always very cheaply wound radial flux motors and not very efficient. I mean, all the cars, all the 100 million cars that we sell around the world every year, they still use copper, they still use the same materials. But by switching to axial flux, which has always been quite an expensive technology, you can only create the force in one direction. So it can only translate into traction motion, and that translates into a almost unbeatable torque density. And torque density is important because that means that you can delete the entire transmission. In fact, let me show you. So this is the smallest one that we do at the moment. So we're in small series production in the UK. This is purely developed in the UK and will be made around the world. But this motor basically replaces a 110cc combustion engine. So when you go to India, where I normally spend a lot of my time, as far as the eye can see, it's 110cc motorbikes. And we've looked at the market carefully. We can scale this up and make it a Tesla motor, but we focused on lightweight mobility first, because that's where the batteries are small and that's where the economics work much easier in a way. So this motor, no transmission. If you look at the bill of material of a Hero motorcycle, they make 7.6 million bikes per year. And more than 80% of that volume is this 110cc power band. We've already converted a Hero. We're in the process of showing it to Hero, as in like, this is what you want with swappable batteries, and it works really well. But again, you can delete the motor, the transmission, the alternator, the starter motor, the lambda sensors, and since April 2020, also a catalyst. The catalyst in the exhaust of these very cheap motorbikes, the catalyst alone is more money than this entire motor.
Wow. So how much do you actually save, and how much is this one likely to, once you get into mass production, how much is it sort of likely to cost?
And this is probably not entirely the forum. I mean, we deal with vehicle manufacturers, and as you know, automotive is cutthroat. It's really like high volume, low margin. But then again, we still have Europe. We're working on marine applications, high margin business, leisure activities, golf cars, forklift trucks, mining industry. It's endless.
So basically, you've cracked that sort of technology nut to be able to sort of like bring together sort of a super efficient electric motor that is low cost and therefore can be deployed in sort of lower price point products. So effectively, you know, these e-bikes out in India, which is like, was it $1,500 a shot or something like that? And also, you've presumably, because of the density of the electric flux, the electric magnetic field, then it reduces the heating, doesn't it, as well, with the cooling and stuff, so you can use it in hot climates.
That's right, and we've always designed this for hot climate, and that's why you can probably just about see it's got water in and water out. And I always compare it to VW produced the VW Beetle, and when they started selling that in California in, I don't know, the 60s or the 70s, motors start overheating. So when you know that this is going to be an inner city commuter solution, and the cost of a little water pump and a little radiator, I mean, most of those motorbikes are already water cooled. Keep it the same. Is water cooled. We're now in the process, as part of the fundraise, we can now afford developing our own inverter, bolting it directly onto this motor, sharing the cooling system, deleting even more parts, and making it truly an unbeatable package. And I mean, the global interest is overwhelming. It truly is.
Brilliant. Well, you've certainly whet our appetite. Now, I've got a bit of a treat for investors, because I've got a 90-second video just to bring a bit more colour to the actual technology. So we'll return in a minute and a half and talk a bit more about the community, the commercialisation strategy and the opportunity. But if we could now sort of roll the tape, that would be great.
We have launched our potentially disruptive AFT140 motor and begun development of a smaller AFT110 variant for mid and lower powered motorcycles in the Asian market, in order to access the fast-growing annual market of $136 billion and 57 million motorbikes. We have produced and demonstrated a P1 in-wheel motor platform in order to access the urban smart mobility sector, receiving large investments from organizations including Toyota, Apple and Google. The global response to the AFT140 has been very encouraging. We only really began to market the AFT140 in the autumn of 2020. And by the end of the financial year, in March 21, we had already generated revenues of around 850,000. So what should you expect to see from us over the next 12 months? Firstly, we expect to see commercial traction continue to accelerate following the launch of the AFT140 and the ongoing development of the AFT110. We are also going to hit some key milestones before the end of 2021, with the development of the AFT190 and the high voltage application, opening the door to the car and commercial vehicle markets, including the high performance segment. As we mentioned, we expect to start delivering blue marine outboards to customers from 2022.
Right, Vic, that looks absolutely fabulous. I love the technology. Now, could you just sort of walk us through the sort of scale of the opportunity? I mean, I used to, after university, I went to Southeast Asia and I went through India and places like Delhi, and it was obviously like a smog patch, unfortunately, because they had so many tuk-tuks and these bikes flying around and stuff like that, and you could hardly breathe even back then, and now it must be even worse. So how many sort of like small 2- and 3-wheeler bikes do they have out in Asia? And globally, what sort of market opportunity are you looking forward to, and what's sort of the key drivers behind this whole shift to sort of like all electric 2- and 3-wheelers?
Well, it's the $1 million question.
It's big.
I am extremely ambitious and extremely creative, and I can't really see the limit to this. I'll give you an example. That everybody always starts talking about batteries. We're on the drive side, and we have an opinion about batteries. But what we've seen is that, for example, in Taiwan, it's much more happening in Asia than it is in Europe and America. So there's a company called Gogoro, and Gogoro is based in Taipei, which happens to be the scooter capital of the world. And a couple of clever guys sat down and said, how shall we go electric? And that's about 80 cc. So it's not the European moped, but it's also not the Indian 110 cc, it's about 80 cc. And they've got millions of them in Taipei. And what they did with Panasonic is they created these swappable batteries, and they're about 10 kilograms each. And now they sell the scooter for less money than the petrol equivalent. And the city of Taipei made the batteries available through lease, and you can lease the batteries, including charging, for less money than what you spend on fuel today. And then the missing link everywhere else in the world is that they put docking stations on every street corner so that you ride, you swap, and within 6 seconds, you're back on the road. And they're literally converting petrol stations to electric battery docking stations. And it gets away from this crazy obsession about fast charging. And you don't really care where the batteries have been. They're not yours anyway. Every 2, 3, 4, 5 years, they replenish the cells, they recycle the cells. Now that, in my opinion, is the holy grail. And that will make that lightweight mobility market segment go electric much faster than cars. And that's why we developed this. We know that the global market in that 110cc market segment is about 60 million vehicles globally, but we believe, and Bloomberg and renowned research centers have confirmed this, independent research, that it is expected to grow to 150 million vehicles per year.
Wow.
So anyone with some sense of how to bend copper, and we're really good at bending copper, you'll be sold out. You'll be sold out for the next 15 years.
Yeah. And what sort of ultimately sort of market share are you hoping to get in this sort of area then? Because I've done a bit of digging in terms of other axial flux manufacturers, and they're all concentrating on sort of like the 4-wheel, the normal passenger car, van or truck. And that's because I think their actual product is costing a lot more, and therefore they need a higher price product to actually absorb that cost. Whereas you've absolutely sort of cracked that sort of performance, efficiency and low cost nut to be able to then sell into a market that looks enormous, growing and underlined, untapped.
Your conclusion is totally right. How we've been working around the clock for 5 years to become an overnight success. This didn't come falling from the sky.
Yeah.
This is very carefully planned, and the IPO is a really nice step in along the way. The way that we sell, and as you know, I've spent a couple of years at Cosworth Technology in Northampton. That's where I got my training, part of the Audi group. And I like paying attention. And what I like about Saietta even more than previously at Cosworth is that we can sell that engineering services, but we have our own product. So a typical example, like a scooter manufacturer in Thailand, and they get told that within 3 years, 50% of their volume has to be electric. And they're like, we don't know what to do. All they know is that there is a gigafactory in Thailand, and they will have to use that battery. Fine. What we then do is we take on the full program and basically say we're here in Oxfordshire in the UK, based on the old RAF airbase. The entire airfield is our test track. So we've got a center of excellence here. We're creating that like European UK production capacity, but also almost like a breeding ground for those Asian customers. So you come to us as a vehicle manufacturer, and we basically integrate this into your vehicle. That will become your version of our motor, and you pay for that development. We prototype it in-house. We start testing it around the clock, because that gets you into production quicker than anyone else.
Yeah.
And we know where all the pitfalls are, but then it's a win-win, because we then sell, or either in a joint venture or under a license deal, our motor tech to be produced in Thailand. And that way we can tackle and Thailand and India, but also Africa. Africa is booming. South America is coming. America's coming. So I very much believe in creating it here in the UK and then spreading it around the world as quickly as possible through proven models, obviously, protecting our IP. And that's why we needed that 3 years to really batten down all of the patents. And we've done that with Reddy and Gross in London. And they've done a fantastic job for us.
Yeah. Well, hey, the market really seems to be flying at the moment, because it was only, I think it was last week, you had Daimler Mercedes buying one of your competitor, Yassas, who I believe actually is an Oxford University spin-out, if I recall. And they didn't actually disclose the price, but it was probably a pretty hefty number. But that's quite interesting, because it's sort of like your two other addressable markets, which you briefly touched on, which was outboard motors, but particularly your high-performance cars, means that one of your competitors, presumably, has just been taken off the market. And therefore, presumably, these high-performance car guys, the OEMs, I don't know, McLaren, Ferrari, I don't know, Porsche, and all these kind of guys, are probably looking for alternative supplies now, because last thing they want to go is to Mercedes for their parts and their axial flux motors. So, okay, right, yes, you fill us in the details.
It's standing ready. It's standing ready. We're about 3 years ahead of schedule. So we focus on low voltage. Had this massive lightweight mobility market where you can still work with swappable batteries. Fantastic tech. We're ready for it. We've got clients. We're already rolling it out. But we can't sit still. We're complete workaholics. I mean, this is the most exciting.
Well, that's what investors want to hear.
Oh, it's just, I mean, but it's not really work. I mean, this is
yeah.
So what we did in January, we started this year, and we developed for a really good client, an Asian client. They said, like, we love this motor, but we want a high voltage version. We were like, we're too busy. We haven't got time. We're doing an IPO. And they were like, no, you're not listening. Here's a bag of money. Like, get on with it. And we were like, right, okay, let's focus. So within 6 months, we created what we call the AFT 190, and it had this competitor from Oxford has a motor version, which is now in the future only available to Mercedes. I mean, life doesn't get any better. Our version is a direct replacement of it, and it produces around 20% more power.
Wow.
That's the trade-off. You can either save your battery consumption or produce more power. That's the measure of efficiency. But indeed, the AFT 190, our door is wide open for inquiries, and we can make people very happy. And I think it'll be at a much lower cost as well.
And what's sort of like, give us a quick sort of like, I don't know, stat on how the high performance car, if it has has 4 of these sort of high voltage axial motors, how fast can it go? What's the acceleration like? Just to sort of like, before I buy one.
If I put 4 of those in your car, then you'll have 880 kilowatts away from the traffic light. You'll be driving circles around Bugattis.
Okay, well, I'm not sure the police would like that, particularly with my driving. But anyway, moving now to the outboard motor, because one thing about sort of like motorboats that I understand is that a lot of legislation now going into marine, both sort of like on sort of leisure, but also sort of like in the sea and stuff like that. We're trying to get away from dirty bunker fuel and petrol and stuff like that, and moving all electric. So what's the sort of opportunity there?
It's, as you know, I'm a Dutchman. I came to the UK 25 years ago, and with our mission here at Saietta, I'm trying to find the brochure, but misplaced it somewhere. But I've been thinking about this for a couple of years now, and it's like, yeah, of course, lightweight mobility. We're on track. We're getting a joint venture sorted out in India as part of the IPO pack. So we've got a good partner in India. We're looking for good partners in the rest of the world, and they will be responsible for upscaling, because that frees up the hands of my Centre of Excellence here in Oxfordshire to like, okay, what's next? What's next? If you go to our YouTube channel, Saietta Electric Drive, you can see a few examples. One of those examples, I know that in Amsterdam, for example, in 3.5 years' time, within the canals of Amsterdam, you cannot produce CO2. That's only 3.5 years away. In Amsterdam alone, there are 12,000 little leisure marine vessels, and all they do is like they poodle around at 6 kilometers an hour, and people drink champagne. That's hopefully alcohol-free champagne, but and that's what they do. So I was like, okay, that sounds like a huge market opportunity. So we jumped into the details, and indeed, there is a competitor in Germany, Torqeedo. But what they've done is taken a off-the-shelf electric motor and put it under the waterline. Now, what people probably don't realize, but I know as a Dutchman, in Amsterdam, you steal a bike, and when you're finished, you throw it over the gate and throw it into the canal, because then you can never be arrested. Only true. But indeed, there are a lot of bikes at the bottom of the canal. So when you go along with your boat and you hit something on the prop, it jumps a leak and then the motor stops. So very Saietta contrarian way, whatever the application is, take the combustion engine away and replace it with a Saietta motor. So all we did is created a extrusion outboard motor with a closed loop cooling system. We plopped one of these on top with an integrated inverter, and we can again beat the price of the biggest competitor. Now that competitor, I didn't even realize, but I researched it with the IPO team. They sold more than 30,000 electric outboard motors. They did more than 65 million turnover euro in COVID year.
Right.
And I'm like, whoa. So indeed, later this year, I think it's at the Mets in Amsterdam, finally the exhibitions are opening again. We're launching Blue Marine, and that is a 100% owned subsidiary of Saietta. So motors are produced in the UK, and then the Blue Marine comes from the other country that I love, and that's Holland.
Yeah, well, I'm guessing those two markets, the high-performance car market and the marine market, they're less price-sensitive than the really sort of like, you know, your automotive traditional volume stuff. And therefore, on that basis, you're going to not only is going to generate better margins, but also because you've got a sort of like you've got that one-stop shop, being able to do end-to-end services, design and commit all that sort of stuff, and helping them, you know, develop it. But also because you've got that unique technology of the lower cost point, then effectively that means that you're going to get better, you're going to get revenues and profits and cash flow generation a lot earlier, so you can really sort of scale that one up and help with the automotive side, I guess, as well. It's going to sort of like a beautiful mix.
Well, that's so true, because what I tend to do is it's all well and good having ideas, but A, you need the money, and B, you need to find the right people. Now, that network we've built, the money is now secured. The really big players in the industry are properly interested. I mean, we've been talking to most of them for quite a while already at boardroom level. But what I like is then to put the best people I can find and put them on mission control. So it almost becomes its own management team. Bring that product to market. That product to market. And that team is already in place on Blue Marine. What they've done on the connectivity side, they're now developing an app where basically it's a bit like you drive your VW Golf in the city in second gear, and then it starts telling you like an arrow that you
go up
next gear. We're doing the same with the boat, where basically like as soon as you start creating waves, you are wasting energy, because you can probably get twice.
Wow, that is clever.
So we're putting that into a bit of electronics, and then including theft protection. So if someone steals your outboard motor, you know where it is.
If it's used in the canals of Amsterdam.
Absolutely. But then interestingly enough, I talked to the Asian clients and they were like, hang on, you're developing that for outboards. We want that for our motorbikes. And suddenly you get this cross-contamination of technologies. And it really, that's my mission, basically, to create that group. And the IPO is the total underpinning of making that possible. And we're on a mission now. It's going
cross-fertilization of ideas. Now, I would actually say another opportunity you've got there as well. I was just thinking about sort of Birmingham canals, but this isn't quite as nice as Amsterdam canals. But one thing actually with staycations, there's a lot of people on barge holidays this year in the UK, and they're all diesel or kerosene driven, and they only follow the Dutch model. Now, you've obviously got a team of James Bond Qs in the company. Is the technology all patent protected and sort of locked up now?
Yeah. It's we started filing in the beginning of 2019. My main commercial guy, Graham Lendon, he's ex Rolls-Royce and Bentley and Aston Martin. He was part of Aston Martin when they went from 700 cars to 7,000 cars. So we've got people on board who know how to scale up. We've got the best guy on R&D, Chris Lyons. He's head of R&D. He's pretty much the inventor of this topology. And we're all shareholders now. Like we've delivered this, and we're delivering the next phase as well. So, but what is interesting is that we truly believe in picking the right applications. Will there be a Saietta Tesla motor in the future? Yeah, I think so.
Wow, that would be absolutely fabulous. Elon Musk on telly talking about the old axial drive motors.
But not tomorrow.
Okay.
I believe that the battery is still the most expensive part. The French, the Japanese, they've all tried swapping stations with cars. I mean, you can't park your Tesla, stick the battery in your rucksack, and go to your apartment on the 10th floor. Whereas with the motorcycle, you can. So I believe that's where the volume is in the next 5 years. That's what we focus on. For the European market, marine is complementary to everything we do. But then there is one more market application which I really want to tackle before ringing Elon Musk, and that is in-wheel motors. And that's not necessarily to compete with Lotus on a British country lane with potholes. There are actually countries around the world that don't have potholes. And
not England, we've got plenty.
The UK country roads are the best.
Yeah.
But the point is, when you go to our YouTube channel, you'll see a little driving platform.
Yeah.
It was part of my marketing campaign pre-IPO. There's a company in Israel called RE, and I believe they've just completed their SPAC.
They've just IPO'd on NASDAQ for about $3 billion. I think they're pre-revenue as well. So it just gives you a sense compared to, I think Saietta's market cap's about £100 million. So there's only a factor of about over 20 or 22 times.
We know RE. We were talking to them 2 years ago, and they really liked our tech, but then they got sidetracked with Mahindra Electric, and suddenly they're doing a SPAC. And I just ran out of patience, basically. I was like, well, you know what? I'll build one myself. So that cost me £100,000 in 8 weeks, and it was done. Now that is not to the level of RE, I wouldn't say that, but in terms of what is the best motor topology to go in wheel for last mile delivery, this one, again, the same one, the same patent. And I welcome inquiries for bringing that forward. The reason I'm so driven about this is actually because Toyota launched the e-Pallet in 2017. If you Google Toyota e-Pallet, it is for me the holy grail after Gogoro with scooters. I believe, and my teenage kids say this, they're like, Dad, why do you need so many cars? And I do like my classic cars, by the way. And they don't get it. They're like, why? What they want is an Uber, and preferably an Uber without a driver, because then they don't have to like socially interact.
Autonomous
and I
vehicles.
truly believe that in 10, 20, 30 years, the roads will be much more empty. You ring an Uber, a pod shows up, it's already got your temperature, your music, your destination. It takes you there, you don't have to pay for parking, and it just disappears. Yeah. And they are really boring applications, but we like boring. It's a bit like Tetra Pak making packaging. I mean, hugely successful company. So give me boring any day. In-wheel motors is the next thing. That's
and the in-wheel motors. I mean, that presumably just increases the space, reduces the weight, because you don't need axles, you don't need, all the other the engine and all the other sort of drive systems and all that kind of stuff. It basically just goes straight. The motor just goes straight into the wheel, doesn't it?
And that's why I deliberately made that platform without a hat on it. Just to prove a point, as in like you literally have a plank of batteries, the easiest way of packaging the batteries, because the floor is completely flat, and then the wheels are tucked away in, the motors are tucked away in the wheels. That's the way forward. Yeah,
well, now, I just moving now to, obviously, you've raised 37.5 million pounds gross, and it's actually, your shareholder register is just full of top-notch investors. You've got Gervais Williams at Premier Miton, Guy Feld at Canaccord, you've got Paul Jordan at Amati, and Andy Bruff, no less, of Schroders, which I would rate as just extraordinarily successful investors over the long term. So they obviously believe and have seen a good investment opportunity. They believe in the technology, massive endorsement. Where are you going to spend the money then of 37? This is building the pilot plant and the sort of like the testing facilities and stuff. And how long is it likely to take?
It's about 2.5 years. So obviously we're at the way that we sell. We sell solutions under license or under JV. People want the added value; they're willing to pay for it. So my turnover is already like exploding, but. As I explained to Gervais, we actually went for a drive here on the airfield on the driving.
Okay. What was Gervais? I hope you'd looked after him.
Absolutely. We went nice and slow.
Okay.
So, but no, we had a great time, and he gets it. He just gets it. I mean, to me, this is so obvious that this is where the market is going. Forget all that sexy stuff with hypercars. It's great, but do you really need a vehicle with like 900 horsepower? I mean, what are you trying to prove? Whereas
James Bond needs one.
And he will. But what I really believe in my team with me is that when you arrive in Delhi in 10 years' time and you blow your nose at the end of the day, your tissue is still clean, basically. Let's start cleaning up that air. That's the mission. Now, in terms of use of proceeds, we are here in Upper Heyford, which is Junction 10 on the M40. We've got the entire squadron command. We've got 40 people already. We're recruiting probably another 100 people in the next 1.5 years. We're getting the best of the best of the best people on board. And this is from where we want to expand. We've got literally this room I'm in now. We're setting up the next pilot line for 2022 to increase our volume. Roughly the European pilot plant, I still say European because I'm not a Brexiteer, by the way, but the UK plant for me should be around 100,000 units.
Yeah.
Half of that will be reserved for license deals and joint ventures to create effectively the recipe, and we sell the kitchen.
Yeah, the products, yeah.
The other 50% is for European or American clients. we are talking to a huge company in America, so that might be a plant in America. So that 100,000 is not big enough. It's more of a center of excellence to prove what we can do.
Yeah.
The other thing, as you know, ex-Cosworth, we need a test center because since the diesel scandal, all of the test centers are fully booked. I want my own test center, and as you know, we've got those beautiful hangars here on the airfield, and we're converting one to a durability test center. It's going to be the coolest durability test center, but also the cheapest to build. And it's not for third parties. Nobody can rent it. Only our clients can use it. Because if I develop your motor and I can run it 24/7, I can get you into production quicker.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, that whole Oxford area actually is a bit of a sort of technology cluster, isn't it? A hub of expertise, because a lot of the automotive sort of experts worldwide are there, and obviously you've got the YASA guys who come out of Oxford University, so you've got a lot of sort of cross fertilization in that whole area, haven't you? So ultimately, if we put all that together, where would you see? Say, let's say in 10 years' time, we've moved, as the experts, you know, Gartner and people like that are saying, 40% of all sort of like, you know, scooters will be electric, and frankly it could be a lot quicker, because you had Daimler only 2 weeks ago, or last week I think it was, saying they're going all electric new vehicles just by 2025. So actually the OEMs are moving even faster than the legislation. So let's say just hypothetically in 10 years time, what sort of scale would you see? How many sort of like parts or units might the actual motor be put in through licenses and stuff?
Well, it's definitely going to be more than 100,000 per year.
Well, I hope so, because I want to buy one.
It's my dream as something that I truly believe in, and again, we focus on relevant applications first. So again, batteries are expensive. That's why we do lightweight mobility first, but very modular and scalable. We've not even talked about wind turbines yet, because if you turn this motor the other way around, it becomes the most...
Yes, of course. Yeah, that was the other thing from my physics electricity, is actually, you could generate electricity.
Absolutely, and we've already run them on solar panels. We can run water pumps for humanitarian, like irrigation systems. And let's be honest about it. The real issue in 50 years' time is energy, water, and food. And if we can contribute to that and for our children, that's what we need to focus on.
Yeah.
Now, going back to your question, I've completely forgot your question.
Yeah, the question was just scale. What sort of magnitude do you think this sort of like could be in sort of 10 years' time? I mean, I ran sort of top level numbers, and I just hypothetically, I was looking at Gardner, and they reckon that the electric scooter market on its own was going to be 100 million units. And I think that was just 1 unit per bike. So if you had in wheel, it'd be more than that. But and they reckon 40% of that would come into e-scooters. And if you just took 5% of that, you're talking of 2 million units per annum, maybe under license, whatever. And if you run through the numbers, you get a £10 per share sort of valuation compared to 130 today. So that'd be my sort of theoretical. What sort of like... Is this really sort of like, this is just as big as it, you know, potentially could? I mean, it's just enormous, and there aren't that many competitors either.
No, let it happen. My dream is, I would say within 10 years, maybe sooner, the strongest, only the best joint venture partners around the world. So the UK will be very much the motor development center. Marine we do from Holland. And then we have a joint venture partner in India, China. I would say Africa is a market I would like to get into, South America and America, and then possibly an extra plant in Eastern Europe for the European market. If the mobility market indeed is going electric, then we're probably talking around 200 million units per year.
Yeah.
What is going to be the Saietta market share of that? I don't know, 1%, 5%.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's enormous, isn't it? Absolutely enormous. And I'm guessing it isn't just all electric, is it? If you've got a hydrogen car, they effectively they use a catalyst. They use hydrogen to charge the battery, and so they'll still need this. And likewise with the traditional hybrids, they still run off. They generate the energy for the battery, and then they need electric motors, don't they? So it's actually everything, as I understand it, of clean transport. Isn't just your pure. Effectively, you've betted on all horses, so you can't lose the race.
No, and the scalability. I mean, I heard a rumor a couple of months ago that 50% of the electricity we generate per day is consumed by electric motors, from motors in air conditioning.
Wow.
Fans. I mean, you go to the petrol station, the tank is underneath the ground. So why does it come out of the nozzle? It's a pump. So even nuclear power plants, all they do is they create steam, and then they make a shaft turn, and it's an electric motor that generates the electricity. But what I do like, and that's something I've spoken to a company in France about. I mean, if this is our motor, that's about this size, I could also go to 3 meters in diameter, and you're in the territory of donut-shaped motors for gearboxless wind turbines.
Wow.
And based on the same IP. Not for tomorrow, not for next year, but it's already happening up here, basically. I'm already thinking about it.
Because gearboxes, I'm just thinking about that, gearboxless wind turbines offshore, if you've got less moving parts, you don't get the sort of like the corrosion and stuff like that. I mean, and obviously it's a lot lower cost as well, isn't it? I mean, the performance-wise, servicing-wise, total lifetime cost, that'd be a massive improvement.
Well, Google wind turbine on fire, and you'll see all these like wind turbines with clouds of smoke coming out. It's never the electric motor; it's always the gearbox.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, no, that's all. It sort of fails. It's the weak point. Okay, so just finally, then, what is so investors think about sort of timeline news flow, Vic, going forward? I mean, what are sort of like the milestones that people should watch out for?
That's a good question. It's I mean, we only listed on the 7th of July, and obviously massive thank you to Canaccord and the entire team that have supported me. We couldn't have done that on our own. Canaccord have really taken us by the hand, because for us, and I was talking to the Investors Chronicle yesterday, and I said, and I think as a foreigner I'm allowed to say this, the beauty about the UK, and the one thing that the UK has done fantastically well, is the SEIS.
Yeah, EIS.
Investment scheme. I mean, it deserves a gold medal. And I said this to Minister Sahawi a couple of months ago, and he was like, oh yeah, I completely forgot about it. And what is happening now with that green economy aim is that core tech, green tech companies like ours, they can leapfrog from angels straight onto the stock market and skip the shark arena, like the venture capitalist arena, and that is thanks to the UK regulations. So I just wanted to mention that.
No, you're right.
And the week after listing, Canaccord said, so any news? What can we publish? And I'm like, hang on, I've only got 40. No, it's we've got some fantastic jewels in the oven. In the autumn, we'll be coming out with the first elements of news. All of that is structured through FDI and Canaccord, but there's some good news coming.
Right.
And don't forget, we are only playing with the big players. We probably get 150 emails a day, like, can I buy a motor? I'm a Formula student, or I want to develop a motorbike. Can I have a motor? Forget it. Honda, Hero, TVS, Bajaj. I've got one potential client in China screaming for 30,000 motors, and we were like, okay.
Wow, yeah.
And we were like, well, that's doable. And they were like, no, not per year, per month.
So, yeah, that's sort of like, was it 360,000 per year? Is it just on one? Yeah. When would be sort of first sort of commercial product sales? Do you think you'll do? Is that sometime next year, 2022?
It's ramping up basically. So we are dramatic. I mean, the production line is already on order. We were just fine tuning the last few elements, so based on supplier feedback, to make sure that we can fully automate the production and assembly of this motor, and making it fully carbon neutral. I do need to have a chat with my blonde brother in London for some extra support, because I would love to kit out our pilot factory with solar panels, wind turbines, and show as an export product that we can make it 100% carbon neutral. I think it's possible, but the volume will crank up to that 100,000 over the next, I would say, 2, 3, 4 years, depending on customer demand. And then it's what's far more important is setting up those plants in Asia. That's where the volume is. Okay, brilliant. Well, Vic, thanks very much for time. I'll let you get on your bike. I can see it in the background, the Saietta branding there. So thanks very much for your time, and look forward to touching base, particularly when the news flow comes through after the summer. So thank you. Thank you.